They called him the ghost of the Tetons, a man sitting on a mountain of gold who had not spoken a gentle word to a woman in 10 long years. When Silas Kincaid finally rode into Silver Creek, every widow with painted lips and every beauty with a tight corset lined up on Main Street, hoping to catch the richest bachelor in Wyoming. But Silas did not look at the silk dresses or the smiling faces. He looked past all of them, straight into the shadows of the general store, at the girl everyone mocked. The girl they called Big Martha. The girl who fixed his torn boot when no one else would even bend down. The winter of 1878 was cruel in the Wyoming Territory, but the cold air was nothing compared to the silence that followed Silas Kincaid wherever he went. He was tall and broad, built like a tree trunk, with a thick beard and eyes the color of storm clouds. For 5 years, the people of Silver Creek had only seen him from far away, riding the high ridges of the Teton Mountains like a dark shadow against the snow. Rumors lived longer than truth in that town. Some said he had found a gold vein thick as a man's arm. Others whispered he had killed someone and was hiding from the law. No one knew for sure. They only knew he was rich, powerful, and alone. On a bitter Tuesday morning, the doors of Abernathy's general store swung open with a hard bang. Wind rushed in, carrying snow and the heavy smell of pine. Silas Kincaid stepped inside. The store fell silent. He stomped the snow from his boots and moved toward the counter. His left boot was torn open at the sole. The leather flapped with every step, soaking his sock in icy slush. But the damage was clear to anyone who looked. Standing near the stove were the town's most eager widows. Beatrice Miller adjusted her velvet hat. Clementine Ford, the mayor's daughter, pressed her cheeks to make them look rosy. "Mr. Kincaid," Beatrice said sweetly, stepping into his path. "You must be terribly lonely up on that mountain." Silas did not smile. He did not nod. He barely looked at her. "Move," he said. His voice was rough, low, and final. Beatrice forced a laugh. "If you need a warm meal or some company, my door is always open." "I need nails," Silas said to Mr. Abernathy, cutting her off. "And whiskey." As he stepped around Beatrice, his torn boot caught on a board. He stumbled slightly. Clementine giggled. "He walks like a broken mule," she whispered loud enough for others to hear. Silas stiffened, and his hands curled into fists. He could fight bears, survive blizzards, and break stone with his bare hands. But mockery in a warm room still burned. He was about to leave without waiting for the nails, when a soft but steady voice came from the back of the store. "Sit." The voice was calm, not rude, not timid. Just certain. From behind a stack of blankets stepped Martha Higgins. She was 24 and the heaviest woman in Silver Creek. Her dress was plain gray and loose. Oil and flour marked the fabric. Her dark hair was pulled tight into a simple bun. She kept her eyes lowered. "My boot's busted," Silas said. "I can see that," Martha replied. She pointed to a wooden crate near the stove. "Sit. You'll lose a toe walking back up the mountain like that." The widows waited for him to laugh at her. They expected him to insult her size. Instead, he sat. Martha knelt slowly, lowering herself with effort. She lifted his heavy foot into her lap. Her hands were warm and strong. From her apron, she pulled a thick needle and waxed thread. "Don't look at me," she murmured quietly. "Just drink your whiskey." The store stayed silent for 20 minutes. Only the crackle of the stove and the steady push of her needle through tough leather filled the room. She did not rush. She reinforced the heel, doubled the stitching, and sealed the edges tight. It was careful work, skilled work. When she finished, she set his foot down gently. "That will hold," she said, rising slowly. Silas stood and stamped his foot. The boot felt stronger than before. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold nugget the size of a robin's egg. Half the room gasped. He held it out to her. Martha stepped back. "No," she said softly. "Take it," he replied. "I didn't fix it for gold. I fixed it because it's cold outside." She turned and disappeared into the back room before he could argue. Silas stood still, staring at the empty doorway. Then he looked at the two beautiful women, watching the gold with hungry eyes. Slowly, he put the nugget back into his pocket, grabbed his whiskey, and walked out without another word. By morning, the entire town was buzzing. Silas Kincaid had gold, real gold, and Big Martha had touched him. At the barber shop, Sheriff Brady laughed loudly. "The ghost of the Tetons and Big Martha. That's a sight I'd pay to see." The men laughed with him. But in the small shack at the edge of town, there was no laughter. Tobias Higgins, Martha's father, has slammed an empty bottle onto the table. "You turned down gold," he screamed. "Beatrice says it was worth $50. Martha stirred a pot of thin bean soup and kept her eyes down. "It wasn't right," she said. Tobias grabbed her arm hard. "I owe $30 at the saloon. They'll break my legs." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't pay debts," he shouted. Then his eyes changed. A greedy thought formed. "Maybe it's not too late," he muttered. "They say he looked at you. Actually looked at you." Martha felt a chill. "He was just grateful." "He's rich," Tobias said, "and lonely. Men get desperate in winter." The next morning, he shoved a basket of biscuits into her hands. "You're going up the mountain. You'll apologize and charm him." "I won't," Martha said quietly. Tobias stepped closer, his breath sour. "You'll do as I say, or you can sleep outside." 3 days later, Silas was chopping wood outside his cabin when he heard a mule climbing the snowy path. He lifted his Winchester rifle and aimed. Then he saw her. Martha, wrapped in blankets, struggling through deep snow. He lowered the rifle. "You lost," he called. She dragged the basket down and walked toward him, breathing hard. "My father insisted I bring these," she said, "as apology for refusing your gold." Silas noticed the bruise on her arm where the shawl had slipped. "Your father hit you." "That's not your concern," she said firmly. "Here are the biscuits. I'll be going." "Blizzard's coming," Silas replied. 4-hour ride back. You won't make it." She looked at the dark sky. Fear flickered in her eyes. "Get inside," he said. "Unless you want to freeze." She hesitated only a second before following him in. The cabin surprised her. It was warm, clean. Shelves of books lined the walls. Shakespeare. History. Maps. "You read?" she asked. "I have time," he answered. The storm raged outside while they sat near the fire. They did not talk about gossip. They spoke about leather stitching, about her mother, who had been a seamstress in Boston. "If the inside isn't strong," Martha said softly, "the whole thing falls apart." Silas watched her in the firelight. He saw more than size. He saw steady hands, intelligent eyes, quiet strength. "I have a proposition," he said at last. Martha stiffened. "I need a partner, a wife in name, someone I can trust. You marry me, you get half the gold, protection from your father, at a home where no one mocks you." She stared at him. "You want to marry me?" "Let them laugh," he said. "I prefer a sturdy boot over a painted slipper." Martha thought of the store, the laughter, the bruise on her arm. She reached for his hand. "I say yes." The blizzard ended 2 days later, and by noon, Silver Creek would fall to its knees. The sky was clear and sharp the morning Silas Kincaid rode back into Silver Creek, with Martha sitting in front of him on his horse. Snow still covered the rooftops, but the sun made everything shine like glass. People stepped out of shops when they heard the sound of hooves. Silas did not slow down. Martha sat wrapped in his heavy buffalo coat, her hands gripping the saddle horn. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole town could hear it. She felt every stare, every whisper, every cruel memory pressing against her back. The blacksmith lowered his hammer. The baker came out with flour on his hands. Beatrice Miller and Clementine Ford stood frozen on the wooden boardwalk. Silas stopped in front of the office of Judge Whitaker. He dismounted first, then turned and lifted Martha down as if she weighed nothing. His hands were steady and careful. "Head up," he said quietly near her ear. "You're with me." They stepped inside the dusty office. The judge looked up, startled. "Mr. Kincaid," he stammered, "what brings you down from the mountain?" "I'm here to get married," Silas said. The judge blinked. His eyes moved slowly to Martha. "To Martha Higgins?" he asked. "Is there a law against it?" Silas replied calmly. The ceremony was short. No music, no flowers, just the scratch of a pen and the ticking of a clock. When it was time for the ring, Silas did not pull out a small store ring. He removed a leather cord from around his neck. Hanging from it was a heavy gold ring set with a deep red ruby. "My grandmother's," he said. He slid it onto Martha's finger. It fit perfectly. Her breath caught. No one had ever given her something beautiful. "By the power vested in me," the judge said nervously, "I pronounce you husband and wife." The door burst open. Tobias Higgins stumbled inside, his face twisted with anger and greed. "You can't do this," he shouted. "She's my daughter. She belongs to me." Martha stepped back, old fear rising in her chest. Silas moved forward. "She belonged to you," he said calmly. "Now she is my wife." Silas reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He tossed it at Tobias. It landed against his chest with a heavy clink. $200 in gold dust, Silas said. "That covers every debt you owe in town. If you come near her again, I'll bury you where no one finds you." Tobias grabbed the pouch. His anger faded instantly. He did not look at Martha. He did not say goodbye. He rushed out of the office toward the saloon. Martha stood shaking. Silas took out a clean handkerchief and wiped her cheek gently. "Tears are done," he said. "We have business." They stepped outside. The crowd had doubled. Silas took Martha's hand and raised it so everyone could see the ruby blazing in the sunlight. "My wife," he announced. Silence fell across Main Street. Beatrice's face turned pale. Clementine's lips trembled. Silas did not take Martha back to the mountain that day. Instead, he walked her to the Grand Hotel, the finest brick building in town. "Best suite," he told the clerk, "and send for Mrs. Galloway, the dressmaker." For the next week, Silver Creek watched in disbelief. Mrs. Galloway measured Martha carefully. "You have strong shoulders," she said, "and a waist hidden under these sacks." Silk dresses arrived, deep green, rich blue, dark red, colors that made Martha's hazel eyes shine. For the first time in her life, she ate full meals. Roast meat, fresh red, vegetables. Her body stopped holding on to fear. Her laughter came easily. Silas watched her closely. "They're afraid of you," he said one evening over dinner. "Afraid?" Martha asked softly. "They laughed when they thought you were weak," he replied. "Now they see you beside me. That changes things." Across town, in the mayor's house, anger burned. Mayor Cornelius Ford paced his parlor. Beatrice Miller sat stiff in a velvet chair. Clementine stood by the window, furious. "He's humiliating us," Beatrice hissed, parading her around like royalty. "It's the gold that matters," the mayor muttered. "If he invests elsewhere, this town loses everything." Clementine's voice was sharp. "If they have a child, that fortune stays with them forever." The room fell silent. Beatrice leaned forward slowly. "And then we separate them." The mayor looked uneasy. "How?" Beatrice's eyes were cold. "We plant doubt." In the corner of the room stood a man named Jack Thorne, a drifter, handsome, dangerous. He worked for money and did not ask questions. $500, Beatrice said smoothly. "Convince Silas that his bride is not so innocent." Jack smiled. The trap was set for Tuesday. Silas rode to his mining claim early that morning. Before leaving, he told Martha to stay inside or take a guard. But Martha wanted to surprise him. She wanted to buy him a new saddle for his horse. She slipped out the back door of the hotel alone. As she passed the alley behind the saloon, a hand grabbed her wrist. "Well," a smooth voice said, "if it isn't the Queen of Silver Creek." She turned. Jack Thorne stood close, blocking her path. Let me pass," she said firmly. He stepped closer, trapping her against the brick wall. "Silas leaves you alone, and you come wandering. Maybe you're looking for something more exciting." "I'm looking for a saddle," she said coldly. Suddenly he grabbed her waist and pulled her against him. He tore at the lace on her collar and messed her hair with rough hands. "Get off me!" she shouted, pushing him hard. She was stronger than he expected. He stumbled backward. At that exact moment, the saloon door opened. Mayor Ford and 2 councilmen stepped out. And down the street, riding fast, came Silas Kincaid. He had returned early due to a broken wagon wheel. He saw the torn dress. He saw the stranger near his wife. Jack wiped at his own cheek, pretending to clean lipstick. "Next time," Jack sneered loudly. "Don't be so rough." Silas dismounted slowly. The air felt heavy. Martha ran toward him. "He attacked me." Mayor Ford stepped forward. "We saw them embracing," he said. Another man nodded. She waved him over. Martha's chest tightened. "They're lying." Silas looked at her. He remembered the woman who fixed his boot in silence, the woman who walked through a blizzard, the woman who said she had dignity. He stepped past her and walked straight to Jack. "You say she wanted you?" Silas asked quietly. "She couldn't keep her hands off me," Jack replied. Silas moved faster than lightning. He grabbed Jack by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "My wife doesn't lie," Silas said. Jack's face turned red. He clawed at Silas's arm. "Tell the truth." "It was a bet," Jack choked. "They paid me. The mayor. Beatrice. Yet they said if you thought she was loose, you'd throw her out." Gasps filled the alley. Silas dropped him into the mud. He turned to the mayor. "I own your debt," Silas said calmly. "The bank sold it to me this morning. Your house, your land, everything." The mayor's mouth fell open. "You have 24 hours to leave town," Silas continued. "Or I remove you myself." Silas returned to Martha. He wrapped his coat around her torn dress. "Let's go," he said softly. The crowd parted as they walked away. Back in the hotel room, Martha's hands trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You revealed the snakes," Silas replied. "Now I know where they hide." He cleaned her face gently. When she leaned into him, he held her close. But outside, anger was growing. By nightfall, a mob gathered. Sheriff Brady stood at the front with a gun. "Silas Kincaid," he shouted. "You're under arrest." A brick smashed through the hotel window. Then a lantern flew onto the porch. Flames rose instantly. Smoke filled the lobby. Silas pulled Martha toward the kitchen. The back door was blocked with a wagon. "It's a trap," Martha coughed. Silas looked around. Heat climbed the walls. "Window," he said, pointing upward. "No," Martha answered quickly. "The root cellar." She tore back a rug. Beneath it was a metal ring set into the floor. Silas pulled with all his strength. The door ripped open. They climbed down into darkness, just as the ceiling collapsed in fire above them. They crawled through a narrow tunnel beneath the town. Mud soaked her silk dress. Smoke burned their lungs. They emerged near the frozen creek behind the hotel. The building was a tower of flames. "They think we're dead," Silas said quietly. Before they could move, a shadow stepped from under the bridge. Tobias Higgins stood there with a shotgun aimed at them. "They promised me $1,000, he cried, "if I made sure you didn't come out." Martha walked forward through the icy water until the gun was inches from her chest. "Pull it," she said softly. Her father sobbed. He dropped the gun into the creek. Silas picked it up and unloaded it. "Leave Wyoming," Silas told him. "If I see you again, I won't be kind." Tobias ran into the dark. Silas looked at Martha. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "With my life," she answered. "Good," he said. "Tonight, Silver Creek learns what happens when you try to burn a mountain." And dawn was coming. Dawn came quietly over Silver Creek, soft and golden, as if nothing terrible had happened in the night. Smoke still rose from the black ruins of the Grand Hotel. Charred beams leaned against each other like broken bones. The town gathered in the square, whispering, staring at the ashes. Mayor Cornelius Ford stood on the hotel steps, with his coat buttoned tight and a grave look on his face. Beatrice Miller stood beside him dressed in black, holding a lace handkerchief to her dry eyes. "It is a tragedy," the mayor announced loudly. "A terrible accident. The lantern must have tipped. Mr. Kincaid and his poor wife were trapped inside. We did all we could." Beatrice nodded sadly. "Some men bring ruin with them," she said softly to the women near her. And poor Martha followed him. The crowd murmured. Some looked sad. Others looked uneasy. The mayor cleared his throat. "As acting official, I will take temporary control of Mr. Kincaid's holdings to settle town debts." "Is that so?" The voice cut through the square like a rifle shot. Every head turned. Walking down Main Street were two figures covered in soot and mud. Their clothes were torn. Their faces were blackened with smoke, but they walked upright. Silas Kincaid and Martha. Gasps filled the air. "Ghosts," someone whispered. The mayor staggered back, and Beatrice dropped her handkerchief. "You're dead," the mayor breathed. "Disappointed?" Silas asked calmly. He stepped forward, his boots crunching over frozen mud. Martha walked beside him, her ruined silk dress dragging behind her like a battle flag. "The fire you set didn't finish us," Martha said, her voice clear and steady. She pointed at Beatrice. "I saw you throw the lantern." "Liar," Beatrice snapped. "She's hysterical." Before Sheriff Brady could move, the sound of thunder rolled across the street. 6 riders galloped into town. Their coats were long and dusty. Silver badges shone on their chests. United States Marshals. The lead rider dismounted and stepped forward. "Nobody move," he said firmly. The crowd froze. Silas nodded once to the marshal. "Right on time." "You sent the telegram 3 days ago," the marshal said. Said you had proof of embezzlement and conspiracy." The mayor's face drained of color. 3 days ago? But the fire was last night. "I didn't come to town for dresses," Silas replied. "I came to check your books." He turned toward the crowd. "This man," he said, pointing at the mayor, "stole tax money to cover his gambling debts. When I refused to invest in his failing schemes, he tried to burn my wife and me alive." Murmurs grew louder. Anger replaced confusion. "And her," Silas added, looking at Beatrice. "She paid a man to ruin my wife's name. Then she paid another to kill her." Beatrice shook her head wildly. "He's lying." "Am I?" Silas asked quietly. At that moment, Jack Thorne was dragged forward by 2 marshals. His throat was bruised from the night before. "They paid me," Jack croaked. "The mayor and Beatrice. $500. The square erupted. Sheriff Brady tried to slip away, but a marshal grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Metal cuffs snapped shut around the mayor's wrists, around Beatrice's wrists. "You can't arrest me," the mayor shouted. "I am the law." "Not anymore," the marshal said. Martha watched silently as the most powerful people in town were led away like common thieves. For the first time in her life, no one laughed at her. No one whispered. They only stared. The baker stepped forward slowly. "Mrs. Quincaid," he said, lowering his head. "We're sorry." Others followed. The blacksmith, the shopkeeper, even Mrs. Galloway. Apologies came like falling snow. Quiet, relentless. Silas did not smile, but he did not gloat. He simply took Martha's hand. "We're rebuilding the hotel," he announced, "and no one in this town will be judged by their looks again. Not while I own it." Then he turned to Mr. Abernathy. "The general store deed is yours, on one condition. Every customer gets respect." Abernathy nodded quickly. By afternoon, the marshals rode out with the prisoners. The town felt smaller without its false leaders. Silas and Martha returned to the hotel ruins one last time. Smoke still drifted into the cold air. "You lost your finest building," Martha said softly. "I can build another," Silas replied. "I can't build another you." She looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. They packed their mule that evening. No parade, no music, just quiet departure. "Ready?" Silas asked as he helped her onto Midnight. To the cabin?" she asked. "To our home," he corrected. They rode toward the mountains as the sun dipped low, turning snow peaks into rivers of gold. Winter passed. Spring melted the ice along the creek. Wildflowers bloomed across the high meadows. The cabin that once held only silence now held laughter. Martha filled the shelves with neatly folded cloth. She stitched curtains for the windows. She cooked real meals. She read books beside the fire. Silas no longer sat alone, staring at flames. He listened to her voice. He listened to her hum while she worked. And when she walked across the cabin floor, she walked with confidence. Months later, when they rode into Silver Creek for supplies, the town did not see Big Martha. They saw Mrs. Martha Quincaid. Children waved at her. Women asked for her advice on sewing and business, while men tipped their hats. No one dared mock her again. They called her the Mountain Queen, but Silas never called her that. To him, she was simply Martha. The woman who fixed his boot without asking for gold. The woman who stood in front of a gun without fear. The woman who mended more than leather. One quiet evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Tetons in soft pink light, Martha rested her head against his shoulder. "You ignored all the pretty widows," she said with a small smile. "I chose the only one who was real," Silas answered. The wind moved gently through the pines. The ghost of the Tetons was gone. In his place stood a husband, and beside him sat the woman who proved that true worth is not stitched into silk or painted on a face, but sewn deep inside the soul. And in the whole Wyoming territory, no one ever called her Big Martha again. She was loved.
Hi, my name is Robert Bowen, the owner and manager of Rugged Heart Man. After watching the video, Mountain Man ignored all pretty widows, he chose an obese girl who mended his torn boots in silence. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? For me, the story leaves behind a quiet sense of appreciation for looking beyond appearances and noticing the character someone shows through their actions. Small acts of care and kindness often reveal far more about a person than first impressions ever can. And that's a lesson worth remembering in everyday life. What part of this story stayed with you the longest? Do you think it's easy to overlook someone's true worth because of expectations or appearances? Maybe this week is a good chance to slow down, give someone the benefit of the doubt, or simply recognize the quiet ways people show they care. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and feel free to like or subscribe if you'd enjoy more stories like this.